Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're headed to Yemen.
Oh, wow, Yemen.
Yeah, and we're tackling a tough topic today.
Okay.
It's technology-facilitated gender-based violence. We usually call it TfGBV.
TfGBV. Got it.
And we're going to be focusing on a report from Amnesty International.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they really did some incredible work here. They actually talked to 7 Yemeni women.
Really?
Yeah, who experienced this firsthand between 2019 and 2023.
Wow, so pretty recent.
Yeah, and just to give you a sense of the scale of this problem, one digital rights group in Yemen, they say they're seeing at least 4 cases of online blackmail every day.
Oh, wow.
Every single day.
Every single day.
That's awesome.
And 95% of those asking for help are women.
That's a huge percentage. And it's not surprising when you consider the context in Yemen.
Right.
I mean, women are already facing so many challenges there. Okay, so let's talk about some of those challenges, because I think it's important to kind of set the stage here. So Yemen has this thing called the mahram requirement.
Right.
Basically what it means is that women need a male guardian's permission for pretty much everything.
Yeah, it's incredibly restrictive. Traveling, working, even going to the doctor.
Yeah, and so you can see how that system already limits women's autonomy.
Absolutely. It's a form of control in itself.
And then you add technology into the mix.
And social media, platforms like Facebook.
Right, which, you know, it can be liberating.
It can be, yeah.
But in the wrong hands, it can be really dangerous.
For sure.
So we're dealing with a society where women's voices are already suppressed.
And now technology is being used to further silence and control them.
And that's what makes this so insidious.
It takes those existing power dynamics, those inequalities, and it just amplifies them in this digital space.
So we're not just talking about online harassment.
No. It's about control. It's about exploitation. And it's about reinforcing deeply entrenched patriarchal structures.
And the consequences can be devastating.
For individuals and for society as a whole. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into some of those consequences, because Amnesty International's report goes into detail about the tactics being used against women.
Okay.
And one that really stood out to me was blackmail.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about demands for money here. We're talking about coercing women into relationships.
Forcing them to do things against their will.
Exactly.
There's a story in the report about a woman, they call her Maha, to protect her identity.
Okay.
Her Facebook account was hacked, and photos of her, some without her niqab, were shared online. The blackmailers demanded money to remove them, a significant sum. And when she couldn't pay the full amount, they even suggested she meet them at a hotel.
Oh, wow.
Strongly implying they wanted sexual favors in exchange.
That is so disturbing. It's like a violation on so many levels.
It is. You've got the hacking, you've got the sharing of private images, the exploitation. It's just a complete disregard for her safety and well-being.
It's horrifying.
Right.
And this wasn't an isolated incident, right?
Right. Another woman in the report, Afra.
Okay.
She was blackmailed with private messages and photos, too. Threatened with financial demands. It's a pattern.
It seems like these perpetrators, they're really preying on women's fears and vulnerabilities, knowing they probably have very little recourse.
Especially in a society that already silences them.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder what happens. Like, what happens if a woman in Yemen does find the courage to report these crimes?
Well, unfortunately, the report reveals a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
There's a story about Aisha.
Okay.
She was actually beaten by her brothers when they found out she was being blackmailed.
Oh, my gosh. So she's being punished for being a victim?
It highlights that deep-rooted misogyny and the culture of shame that surrounds these issues.
That is so messed up.
And even if a woman manages to overcome those hurdles and report it to the authorities, Amnesty International found that police often question the victims about why they even had photos of themselves.
Oh, wow.
Essentially blaming them for the abuse.
So you have this double layer of oppression.
Exactly.
The online harassment itself.
Yeah.
And then the societal and institutional structures that make it nearly impossible to seek justice.
Leaving women trapped.
Yeah.
And the perpetrators, they know they can get away with it.
Yeah. And it doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
The report also talks about bribery within the justice system.
That's rampant.
So some women are being forced to pay officials just to get their cases investigated.
Just to be heard. It's like the system is failing them at every turn.
And what about the psychological impact?
Huge. We're not just talking about a one-time incident here. We're talking about trauma that can linger for years.
Right.
The report talks about women experiencing anxiety, depression, isolation, suicidal thoughts. There's even a case where a survivor attempted suicide.
Because of this?
Because of the unbearable pressure. And she was charged with a crime for it.
Are you serious? So she's being punished for having a human reaction.
It's a tragic illustration of how the system is rigged against these women, even when they are clearly the victims.
And it's not just the emotional toll, right? Mm-hmm. There are economic consequences, too.
Absolutely. Women lose jobs, businesses fail, their social circles shrink.
Just because they've been targeted online?
Just because they've been targeted online. Amira, for instance, in the report. Okay. She was forced to abandon her beauty salon after 11 years, a business she built from scratch.
Wow.
And she was completely ostracized from her family and community.
Oh, my goodness.
Because of online abuse. It's a stark reminder that this abuse has real-world consequences.
And it can literally destroy lives.
It can.
And all of this is happening on Meta's watch.
Yes.
Facebook.
Yeah.
It's their platform. They have a responsibility here, don't they?
Absolutely. They have a corporate responsibility to respect human rights.
And that includes protecting their users. What's striking is that none of these women even considered reporting to Facebook directly.
They didn't know how.
They didn't know how.
Yeah.
So they turned to a local digital security group called Sanad.
To get the content removed.
To get the content removed.
That's a big red flag when it comes to user education.
Yeah.
Especially in a context like Yemen.
Right, where, you have to factor in those cultural factors. Digital literacy levels.
It's just not on the radar.
And it makes you wonder how many women are out there suffering in silence.
Because they don't know where to turn.
Right.
It creates this chilling effect. Women essentially being silenced online.
They reduce their activity.
Stop posting.
Maybe abandon the platform altogether.
Their voices are being erased from the digital space.
It's a vicious cycle, especially in a context where women's voices are already marginalized.
Exactly. It's like taking an already unequal playing field and tilting it even further.
Wow. So we've uncovered this massive problem, this deeply entrenched system of oppression. I'm honestly feeling a bit overwhelmed. What can we even do to start addressing this?
It is overwhelming, but it's not hopeless. There's a lot we can do. And that's really where this deep dive begins.
Right.
Now that we understand the problem, let's explore some solutions.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. So the report doesn't just outline the problem. They actually offer a roadmap for change.
Okay, a roadmap. I like that.
Yeah, concrete recommendations.
Okay, let's hear it.
For both the Yemeni authorities
okay.
and for Meta.
Okay, so let's start with Yemen. What needs to happen there?
Well, they need to take action.
Okay.
Swift and decisive action to address TfGBV. And this means all the authorities.
Okay, so not just one group.
Yeah.
Everyone's got to be on board.
Everyone. The internationally recognized government, the Houthi de facto authorities, the Southern Transitional Council.
Wow, so a lot of different players.
A lot of players, yeah.
Okay, but what does that action actually look like? Passing new laws.
It starts with that, absolutely. They need comprehensive laws and policies that specifically recognize TfGBV.
Okay, so really laying out, okay, this is a crime, this is how we define it.
Exactly. Prevent it, document it, investigate it, address it.
All forms of it. Okay, so no loopholes.
No loopholes. This is serious. And these laws need to provide real remedies for survivors.
Okay, so it's not just about punishing the perpetrators.
No, it's about supporting the victims, ensuring access to justice.
Okay.
Providing reparations, making sure they aren't further harmed when they come forward.
Right, because that's a real risk, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And those remedies need to be trauma-informed, survivor-centric.
Okay, so really putting the needs of the survivors first.
First and foremost. And taking an intersectional feminist approach.
Intersectional,
which means taking into account all those different factors.
Right.
That can shape a woman's experience.
So her socioeconomic status, her beliefs, her ethnicity.
All of it. You have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond laws, too. Amnesty International also calls for public awareness campaigns, educational programs.
Okay, so changing the culture, not just the laws.
Exactly. Challenging those deep-seated gender stereotypes, the discriminatory attitudes.
Yeah.
Because that's where this thrives.
Right.
Empowering women and girls to exercise their right to freedom of expression online.
Without fear.
Without fear.
Sounds like a tall order, especially in a place like Yemen.
It is, but it's possible. And to make it happen, they need to involve civil society,
okay,
human rights defenders, activists, people who are already working on the ground.
The people who really know what's going on.
Exactly. But beyond those kind of broader societal changes, there's a real need for support services.
For the survivors.
For survivors, yeah. Mental health support.
Yeah.
Shelters, protection orders, helplines.
Okay, so kind of a safety net to catch them.
A safety net, exactly. And then there's law enforcement.
Okay.
They need more training, capacity building.
Right, so really equipping them to handle these cases.
Effectively, yeah. And sensitively. They need to prioritize the safety and well-being of survivors.
Right, so not blaming the victim.
No. Holding the perpetrators accountable. And finally, education.
Okay.
Public awareness about TfGBV. Campaigns that really reach women and girls so they know their rights.
Okay, so knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, exactly. Knowing how to protect themselves online. Knowing how to seek help.
Okay, so those are some pretty big steps for Yemen.
They are, yeah. But what about Meta? What can they do?
Right, because it's happening on their platform. They have a role here.
A big role. They need to empower their users. Help them understand the security and privacy measures they already have.
So things like blocking, reporting, filtering.
All of that. Giving survivors a measure of control. Protecting them from harm.
But it's not just about having the tools right. You have to know how to use them.
Exactly. And in a context like Yemen, that might mean going the extra mile.
Right, because just translating those how-to guides, that might not cut it.
It might not. They need to be culturally sensitive. Take into account the specific challenges women face.
Right, so really understanding the nuances of Yemen.
The nuances, yeah. They also need to make sure their human rights due diligence processes are taking that context into account.
Right, because a one-size-fits-all approach to content moderation doesn't work.
It doesn't. You need to consider the cultural sensitivities, the social norms, the specific forms of abuse that are happening in different parts of the world.
Like we were talking about earlier, even the definition of intimate imagery can be culturally specific.
Exactly. So Amnesty International recommends that Meta increase their staff capacity, bring in country-specific expertise, people who understand the cultural context.
So people on those content moderation teams who really get it.
Who get it, yeah. And they suggest that their Trusted Partners program, which works with civil society organizations, they should give those local groups more input.
Okay, so giving them a voice.
Yeah.
In shaping Meta's policies. That makes sense.
It does, yeah. And finally, greater equality and consistency between jurisdictions when it comes to resourcing.
So making sure that users in different parts of the world
are getting the same level of support.
Right, because right now, that's not necessarily happening.
It's not. And that can have real consequences.
Okay, so it's about recognizing that online abuse is a global issue.
Yes. But it manifests differently in different contexts.
And those differences need to be taken into account. It's about making sure that all users have equal access.
Equal access, yeah, to protection and support.
Leveling the playing field. Wow. Okay, it's a lot to process.
It is.
But I think these recommendations paint a pretty clear picture of what needs to change.
They do. And it's important to remember, these changes, they won't happen overnight.
Right.
It's going to take sustained pressure from civil society, from international organizations, from users.
So we all have a role to play.
We all have a role to play, yeah. But I think this report, it gives us a framework. It shows us where those gaps are, and it gives us hope.
Hope that change is possible.
Hope that change is possible.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about governments, tech companies. But what about us? What can we do as individuals to challenge this kind of abuse?
It can feel overwhelming, like one person can't make a difference.
Right, like what can I possibly do?
But even small actions can have a ripple effect.
It does feel overwhelming. Like how can one person really make a difference when we're talking about such a big problem?
I get it. It's easy to feel that way. But I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves about the different forms that online abuse can take. Because it's not always obvious.
Right. It's not always like those really aggressive messages or, explicit pictures.
Right. It can be a lot more subtle than that.
So like what? Give me some examples.
Spreading rumors, making derogatory comments, even just piling on someone who's already being targeted.
Right. So not just the one person doing the harassing, but all the people who kind of join in.
Exactly. It creates this mob mentality, and it can be just as damaging.
And I think sometimes we forget that our words online have real-world consequences.
They do. It's easy to hide behind the screen.
Right, and forget that there's a real person on the other side.
A person who's experiencing real pain, real fear.
Yeah. Their reputation can be damaged.
Absolutely. Their well-being. So before we hit that post button, I think we need to pause and think about the impact.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, think before you speak.
Exactly, but now it's think before you post.
Think before you post. I like that. Okay, so being mindful of our own behavior, but what about when we see it happening to someone else?
Don't be a bystander.
Okay.
If you see someone being harassed, speak up.
Don't just scroll past.
Don't scroll past. Challenge the perpetrator. Report it to the platform. Show support for the victim.
Right, so it's about creating a culture where this isn't okay.
Where we all feel a responsibility to stand up for each other. Because even a small action, a comment, a like, a share, can make a world of difference.
It's like you're reminding them that they're not alone, that someone sees them, that someone cares.
Someone has their back.
And I think we can also amplify the voices of the people who are already doing this work.
Yes.
Share their stories, the research they're doing, support organizations like Amnesty International and SANON.
Exactly. Get the word out.
And let's not forget that change also starts at home.
Absolutely.
Talk to your friends and family. Educate your kids about online safety. Because it's really about building a world where everyone feels safe to express themselves.
Without fear. A digital world that reflects the values we want to see in the real world. Respect, empathy, equality.
I love that. This deep dive has been really eye-opening. And even though this fight is far from over,
It's not.
it feels like there are things we can do to make a difference.
We can.
So to our listener, we leave you with this thought. How can you be an ally to women and girls who are facing this abuse? What steps can you take, even small ones, to make the digital world a safer place for everyone?
Remember, even a single voice can make a difference.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.